All right, let's get started. We're on the top of Tzadi Beis Amid Aleph. We're 5 lines down at a new Mishnah. We really have a lot of ground to cover. We're supposed to get to the Mishnah on Tzadi Gimel Amid Aleph, not the first Mishnah, but the second. Hashem should bless us that we should get there. Otherwise, did everybody daven at 9:30? Does everybody need, you need to daven? All right, so we'll stop at 9. I'll be by myself. You guys are all going to leave. Sit here by myself recording. Maybe it's Brandis. Will stay here on Zoom with me. That's a possibility. All right, let's get started. Yeah. Yeah, true story. True story. We'll leave that conundrum for later. It says a new Mishnah. We're talking about the din that a worker is allowed to munch on food as he's working. Now, ochel poel kishos afilu bedinar. Fascinatingly, a guy who's working, he's a worker, he's harvesting kishos, a gourd of some kind. He can eat even a dinar's worth, and the Rishonim point out, even though he is not being paid a dinar's worth. So there could be a net loss to the owner, to the balabas. And koseves, if he's eating another type of vegetation, ba'afilu b'dinar same. Rabbi Lazar Chasma, Omer, no. Lo yochal pal yeser al scharo. What are you talking about? Like, how could there be a net loss? It doesn't, okay, it won't apply everywhere, but it'll apply somewhere. Usually when you're harvesting, you harvest a large patch of land. But if there is a case scenario where you harvest $10 worth of clock time, but what you harvested is $20, you can eat it. That's what the Machlokes Tanakam and the Chachamim. And then, Machlokes Tanakam and Rabbi Lazar Chasma, the Chachamim Matirim, they agree with the Tanakama. Aval melamden es adam shelo yehei ra'avtan. But we teach the person, we teach the Pole, this is bad business practice. You should not go in like a gluttonous pig and eat all the food that's even more than your value. You'll close all leads. No one's ever going to hire you again. It's bad. It's a bad political move, even if it's mutter. Says the Gemara, Chachamim Hainu Tanakama. The third shita says it's mutter for the guy to eat even more than what he was paid, and so does the first shita. So Mainaf Kamina between them, we'll see 3 answers. Ika Beinahu, that Aval Malamdin, the Tanakama less Malamdin. The Tanakama holds. No, the halacha is that it's mutter. We don't teach him. We don't say anything. He's allowed to do it. Okay, it's a bad decision, but it's not our job to teach him how to fix himself. The Rabbanan, but according to the third sheet in the Mishnah, the Chachamim who are matir, but they're malamdin es adam shlo yeravtan, then islahu malamdin. Then we do try to teach him. That's answer number 1, is whether or not we have a requirement to educate this guy about his poor decisions. Answer number 2, that really the Tanakama and the Chachamim have between them sheet of Rav Asi. Shocking. That according to Rav Asi, even if you were hired to harvest 1 cluster of grapes and you did that, you can then eat the whole cluster of grapes. Nice. Just half of a fellow like that. So obviously these are the 2 shitas that according to the Tanakama mutter. According to the Chachamim, you're not allowed to do that because that's not malamdin. That's not, the math doesn't work. Not just math, but it's not right. There's something's wrong with what you're doing. Fascinating machlokas. I don't even understand the Havamina of the first shita. Like, how does the Tanakama get off the ground? You create a net loss. They hire you. You create a net loss by eating the food. So that's the din d'oraisa. And then, even though we just saw this line of Rav Asi, there's another very similar line. Let's remember our first line was if you were hired to only harvest 1 eshkol. There's another similar line. Even if you were hired to do more, but all you did, right? Not the first case. First case you were hired to do 1. Here you were hired to do more, but all you did was harvest 1 eshkol, that and ochlo, that's mutter. Why do we need both of these lines? We have one line that says that if you're hired to harvest 1, you're allowed to eat the 1. The other one says if you're hired to harvest 10 and you only ate 1, then you're good to go, even if you only harvested 1. But tzricha, we need both. The Gemara says a quarter of the way down on Tzadi Beis and Aleph, this is why we need both shitas, but both comments of Rav Asi. The Eshmin and Hach Kamaisa, if we only had the first line, so Mishum Delo Ikala Mesav Lekelev Shel Balabais, when you're only holding 1 cluster, you don't even put it in a basket. You just grab it from the branch and you walk it in the hive. There's no basket. You're not putting it in one of those pull carts. It's nothing. It's here you go. I plucked 1 cluster. It's an easy piece of cake. About perhaps when I have another job, when I'm really hired to do more, I might have thought that you can't eat until you put it in the basket. That's why we have to have one of these 2 cases. V'yashmin and Bahan, if we only had the second case, that if, in fact, it will be available to you later, so maybe yes, maybe no, therefore we needed to have both cases. That's why we have both of these cases. But let's come back to what we were actually talking about, which is what is the nafkamina between the Chachamim and the Tanakama, and we answer that this is the difference as to whether or not we hold of the Shita of Rav Asi. And again, let's review. The Tanakama would hold that if you were hired to harvest one cluster of grapes and you did so, you can eat it, and according to the Chachamim, you cannot. And the third answer, a little bit more than a third of the way down, says the Gemara by Sema Ikabenau de Rab. We have the Shita of Rab, that is the difference between them. The Amar Rab Matzasi Megillas Starim Bei Reb Chia. He found a hidden Megillah in the house of Reb Chia. Let's take a look at Rashi, a beautiful Rashi, a historical one. Some of my favorites. I love these. Rashi says, where is this Rashi? Megillah Star. It's not quite halfway down, a third of the way down. Rashi says, Dibur Hamaschel Megillah Star. Megillah Tmuna. It was a notebook that you would hide under your mattress. Lefisha Aser Lichtov Halachos. This was right when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was getting to the point of being matir things. The only time one was allowed to write something down, that was the only time you were allowed to write things down before the period of time when we said, so they were right on the cusp of this historically. It was all happening, let's call it, within a handful of years of one another. So these halachos were new. They were not, the Mishnayos weren't fully codified yet. So this was...
The Mishnayos were, and this was explained. In other words, this may have been post. Here was a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan, which is very early.
Yeah, but you will see in a minute that he's quoting from a Tana. So he's writing Tanaic literature. It might not have been a Mishnah, but it might have been a Brisa. But that might well be true. It could be that there's a difference between writing down an Amoraic Shita, aka...
It's not permitted because the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi made the Mishnah.
Right.
Seems like that was supposed to be the end.
Of what?
Of writing.
You're saying there was a second heter?
Well,
Megillah Star. No, it's all one heter, no?
I don't know. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, I've never thought about it. I just assumed it was all one heter.
That's as far as
If we were concerned about the Tanoim, we should definitely be concerned about the Amorot.
Maybe it was shot. Once the gate was
Nachalami.
broken, I don't know. I'm not sure.
I always thought it was one heter because of the way it was framed, which was it's Eisla Sos Hashem Eferusor Secha. So like,
True,
therefore,
but it took
from now on, you can
five
write things down.
generations to further put in writing something.
You're saying to figure out what Rebbe meant in the Mishnayos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something actually right.
Seemingly there was some writing, but all of that is
Or
possible. I
personal
don't. Right, that the Megillah Starim, that was my next comment. The Megillah Starim is personal writing. He heard something, he's like, a Gavaldik Chiddush. You know those books that are completely blank and they say Chiddushei Torah on the front that you buy in like Manny's in Israel when you're in Shana Aleph, So that's what we're talking about. He had a little notebook. Yeah, he was afraid. Anyways, let's see what they found in that sefer. The Amar Rab, Matzasi Megillah Starim Bei Rebbe Chia. The Chasuba, what was written? Isi ben Yehuda Omer. Kisavo bekerem reacha, that you can go into the field of your friends. Vivias kol adam akasu medaber. Anyone's allowed to come eat from your food. Says the Gemara, what does that even mean? Anyone? What about the rules of Geneva? V'amar Rav lo shavak isi chai l'chol beria. Isi ben Yehuda has a shita that is, it's not sustainable. That's not. I just spent $50,000 growing my field, employees, watering. It's expensive, and you can just take it all. Amar Ravashi, Amrisa l'shmaisa kamed Rav Kahana, that Ravashi was talking about the sugya to Rav Kahana, and Ravashi suggested Dilma ba'osim b'sudasim da'avdu b'achlu. It's not that anyone can come take, but anyone who wants to make a suda, they want to make a meal, so they go work for free. But while they're not getting a salary, what they are allowed to take is food along the way. Maybe that's what we're talking about. Amarli, Rav Kahana said, "Afilu hachi." Even if that were to be true, nichale leinish ba'oger agure. It's better for the guy to rent to people. The niktefei lepar to say, and then they can pluck from the field. So they struggle to understand the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. But what we see from here is that the Tanakama doesn't hold of Rav. It must be an actual poel and not a volunteer. And the Chachamim do hold of Rav, and that's a third nafkamina. Very well, so says the Gemara. For the next Amud, we're going to be dealing with only one question. And this is the question we're going to be dealing with. We're 2/3 of the way down on Sadi Beis Amud Aleph. Ibayalahu, Poel Mishelohu Ochel, O Mishel Shamayim Hu Ochel. When the Torah grants permission to a Poel to eat food as he's working, is that like extra money in his pocket? It's his, he can do with it as he sees fit? Or is it Mishel Shamayim Hu Ochel, and therefore he's allowed to not do with it as he sees fit, only he is the beneficiary? Rashi articulates this 2/3 of the way down. Dibur Hamaskal Mishelohu Ochel, Tosefes Schar Hu Shosifalo Torah. The Torah gave you a bump, right? Let's call it a 5 to 10% bump. O Mishel Shamayim b'matnas gmilus chasadim kishar matnosanim. No, it's a total gift. It's not part of your salary. It's a unique halachic mina shamayim gift, but it's not salary. It's different. And the Gemara says, "L'may nafkamina." What's the difference? Well, the difference would be 1,000 things, but let's give one picture. Amar tnuli ishti ubanai. Let's say that the worker, the poel, says, "Don't give it to me. Give it to my wife and my sons." If he owns it, if it's like as Rashi said, a tosefes schar, yahavinan lehu, no problem, no problem. You want me to put it in your kid's bank account? I don't care. I'm just hitting keys on the keyboard. This is all mishalo. It's yours. But if it's a din from shamayim that money goes to you and it's not regular salary, so do we say that the right and the access of the poel to eat food along the way, is that mishalo, or is that a din of min hashamayim? We are going to see 8 answers to this question. And we'll stop with this question answer session at the Mishnah on the top of Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph. So the next 60, 70 lines is dedicated. It's not a difficult piece of Gemara, but let's just hold cup. We have to remember what our question is. When a poel benefits from food while he's working, is that food mishalo or is it min hashamayim? So answer number 1, or at least attempt number 1, is about 20 lines from the bottom of the page, 3/4 of the way down. First words on the line, Toshma. This is our Mishnah. We had said in our Mishnah, Ochel poel kishos ve'afilu b'dinar. We said that if I'm working and harvesting gourds, I'm allowed to eat a dinar, even though that's more than what I got paid. And koseves ve'afilu b'dinar, same with koseves. Now, i'amris mishalohu ochel, ogir b'danka, ochel bezuza. If you want to say that which I'm allowed to benefit is my salary, it doesn't make sense that a perk in my salary overrides all of your profits. That's not Svaradik. That doesn't make any sense. You can't. The OU wants me to fundraise, but I'm allowed to take 110% of what I fundraise. That's not mistaber. So, what?
The model does not.
No, I tried in the OU. It didn't work. Maybe 10% kickbacks, Well, kickbacks are actually illegal, so we don't actually do kickbacks.
Your expenses are going to be 110%.
Yeah. If I have to fly to Israel for a $500 gift, so the math doesn't work. So the Gemara says it doesn't make sense. From our Mishnah alone, it seems that it can't be mishalo because the amount of money that you're getting is financially backwards. The Gemara says, "Elamai mishal shamayim hu ochel." So if you have the same problem, even if it's min hashamayim, who cares? The math still needs to work. Who cares? Ogir bedanka achil bezuza. We have the same problem. The guy's getting paid 1/6 of what he pulled in. So he gets paid, $2, and he took $12 worth of corn. I don't care who you say. It's like, by the way, what's the havamine of the Gemara? That there's a difference between mishalo and min hashamayim as it relates to this svara. It must be that Rachmana Zachile, Hachanami Rachmana Zachile. It must just be this categorical Torah stipulation.
Like cigar.
What?
There's a certain amount that has to be given. But no matter how much profit you're making than that. So that's what this is. Like Rashi had said that Mishal Shemayim.
Yep. B'matnas gmilus chasadim kishar matnasanim.
So it also doesn't make sense always financially.
Right. So the profits and losses sheet doesn't always look the way that it should.
Say like I mean, it's endless.
Correct.
Right?
Endless. Yeah.
But
yeah, a similar model. So the Gemara says, in short, we can't learn anything from here because there's multiple ways to learn this. And maybe perhaps we would say that the Torah was mizakeh the person categorically. And you're right. Sometimes the math doesn't work out in favor of the balabas. That's true. Sometimes the guy profits more than he gave the balabas. So let's try source number 2 to see if we can come up with a possibility. We're 3 lines before the middle width lines. Toshma, Rabbi Lazar Chasma Omer. This was the second shita that we saw in our Mishnah. What is this machlokes about? My labo kemiflagi the mar savar mishalahu ochel, umar savar mishal shamayim hu ochel. Isn't the machlokes between them as to whether or not we say mishalo versus mishal shamayim? So says the Gemara, no, lo. The kule alma mishalohu ochel. Everyone would agree that it's mishalo. So why is there a difference in our Mishnah between Rabbi Lazar Chasma, who says that the poel can't take more than he makes, and the Chachamim, who say that he can? We're arguing what the word kinafshacha means in the pasuk. If you have the pasuk on the side, the pasuk reads ki savo b'cherem re'echa v'chalta navim ki nafshacha. You can eat grapes according to your soul. What does that mean? So kinafshacha b'divrei shemoser nafshu alav, only for that which you're being moser nefesh for, namely your salary, your mesiris nefesh, your hard work. You make $100,000 a year. You can't eat more than even $100,000 a year. That there's a totally different drasha of kinafshacha having totally different ramifications, and therefore maybe that's not what our machlokes is. So therefore the Gemara moves on to answer number 3. Tashma, we have a brisa, and here the brisa is specific that the person who's hired to do the harvesting of grapes is a nazir. Zeloto, go get another job. You don't take someone from AA to be a bartender. You got to just make sure that we're not setting people up for failure.
Our star student.
Yeah, our star student. Yes. He's not only a patient who's been successful, but he's going to be a patient again. Says the Gemara, Tashma, Nazir Sha'amar Tanu, and there's a girsa change here, Tnula Ishti Uvanai. If you have a Nazir who says, look, I'm a Nazir, I can't drink grapes, but my wife is not a Nazira, my son's not a Nazir, give it to them. What's the din in the brisa? Ein shomin lo. Too bad. Now, if really the gift that the poel is allowed to benefit from, if it's really his, amai ein shomin lo. Why wouldn't they give it to the wife and to the daughter? They're not Nazirim. It's my money. Let's say in the OU we get a cost of living bump every year, whatever it is. They give a range, and then the boss gets to choose within the range what every employee gets. So if they say to me, Phil, what do you want to do with that money? I say, put it into my 403B. Okay, it's my money. So the Gemara says, if we say that the money belongs to the Nazir, why can't he earmark that money for his family members? Elamai, must not be that way. But the Gemara says, no, that's not correct. There's something different by a Nazir. Hasam, over there in the case of Nazir, Mishum lech lech amrina Nazir. We tell the Nazir, go away from here. Sechor sechor, walk around. L'char melo sikrav, don't get close to the kerem. Namely, over here, it could be that it's Mishal, it could be Mishal. We don't know what it is. But the case of Nazir is totally different, because there we're just saying, don't touch this with a 10-foot pole. Again, he has a horrible job for his situation. Horrible job. Even mishras, even a tiny little amount of liquid, it's an isur deraisa, I mean, with the right shiur. So the Gemara says you can't learn from there. So let's go to source number 4. 5 lines from the bottom of the page on Tzadi Beis Amud Aleph. About 24 minutes left. Givaldik. Tashma. Poel. Now it seems we're not talking about a Nazir. We're back to a regular worker. Sha'amar tznu li'ishti uvanai. Also ein shomen lo. I v'i amris mishalohu ochel. If in fact the Poel's benefit as a worker is he's allowed to eat this food and it's his, if it is mishalo, amai ein shomen lo. Why wouldn't they listen to the Poel? So says the Gemara, we have to touch up this brisa too. My Poel, Nazir. We have 2 brisas that are both talking about a Nazir. Says the Gemara, wait one second. V'hatanya Nazir, v'hatanya Poel. We had a brisa that expressly used the word Nazir. And we had the next brisa which expressly used the word Poel. So, of course the Poel is not a Nazir. We just had the word Nazir as a Nazir. Why is Poel a Nazir? Well, when you see the answer is actually talking not such a bad answer, but not all Havaminas are bad, you know. So says the Gemara, Midi Gabe Hadad Tanyan. If you tell me that the brisa of Nazir and the brisa of Poel are taught one next to the other, then you're right. Pasnash, then you should not be able to say that the brisa of Poel means Nazir. But if the brisa of Nazir is in Maseches X and the brisa of Poel is in Maseches Y, and you need to make an ukimta on Poel, say there, that's fine. As long as it's not Gabe Hadade Tanya, they're not taught together. If they're taught together, then we can bounce them off each other and kind of, Chosam Shel Kodesh Baruch Hu Emes. You can't say Nazir is Poel and Poel is Nazir. That you can't do. But when they're in different Masechtas or they're not taught together, then no problem. That brings us to our fifth source, Tashma, 3 lines from the bottom. Very similar to the last price that we said. This is based on a different pasuk, not Nazir. We said Nazir to the last case of Poel. Here we're not saying Nazir. Here we're saying it's a pasuk of El Kel Yachal Lo Sitain. Nazir. You can't make an ukimta over here that this Poel is also a Nazir because Yachi. Why did it say Mishum El Kel Yachal Lo Sitain? Mishum Lech Lech Amrina Naziru. Like we said before, Elamai. It can't be that a Poel in this case is talking about a Nazir. Says the Gemara, Inachanami. You're 100% right that if this was talking about a Nazir, it should have said something else, and that's what we mean. And when we say the pasuk of it didn't mean to circumvent the fact that this Poel is a Nazir. This Poel is also a Nazir. The ID de Ketani la Belashon Poel, because in the beginning of the Brisa it said Poel, Kanasiv Lakra de Poel. It quoted the pasuk about a Poel, but this Poel happens to be a Nazir. The point is that we're able to finagle every one of these Brisas to be learned one way or another that doesn't conflict with either the Shita that the benefits of the Poel eating the fruits is Shelo or Mishal Shaman. We have no strong rayas yet. We just don't know. Last line for answer number 6. Says the Gemara Toshma, we have a brisa. Hasocher es hapoel liktzos b'te'enim. We hire someone to be liktzos te'enim. The last Rashi on the page says, what does it mean liktzos? Leyabshon b'sadeh lasos ketzios. We're drying out the figs. That's what the person is hired for. So says the Gemara, hareze ochel upater mina meiser. You're allowed to eat that food, and you're pater from meiser. Now, what if the guy says al manashe ochel ani uvani or ani uvanai? Oh, sheyochel bani bischari. I want to feed my kid. So look at this funky distinction. Who ochel a pater? The worker himself, if he eats it, no problem, he's pater. Ubeno ochel v'chayev. But the son is chayev in maisros. So this distinction is very odd. V'i amris mishelohu ochel beno amai chayev. If in fact it's true that I want to give it to my son and it's mine, why is my son chayev in meiser? Last I checked, my kids eat my food. Whatever my status is with meiser should apply to my children. They're eating off the same plate. So how could it be that I am pater from maisros as the poel, but my son is chayiv in maisros? So Amar Ravina, you're right, but the asering on the kid isn't because of what you think it is. It's not because of Mishalo or Mishal Shavayim. It's because Mishum de Michze Kemekach. It looks like you made a purchase, and it looks like you didn't pay meiser on your purchase. As it relates to the poel, I'm plucking off and I'm eating. But what about the child? The child sees grapes coming home in a jewel bag and he starts eating without being mafresh men. That's mechze kemekach. That doesn't look right. And therefore, we restrict the child from eating it without paying meiser. Okay, so therefore no raya yet again. We're going to see answer number 7 here on the 5th line. Answer number 8 is about 2/3 of the way down, and answer number 8 will take us to the Mishnah. Let's see how things go. We may have to stop at that Mishnah, which is a fine stopping point. I may record a little bit just to catch up so Shabbos isn't so long. It says the Gemara as follows for answer number 7. Again, what are we asking? When a poel is allowed to eat from the food that he's harvesting, is it mishalo? Is the money a tosefes to his salary? Or is it mishal shamayim? Is it a pure matana from HaKadosh Baruch? Toshma. The Brisa says, this Brisa we will see on the next Mishnah, which is on the top of the next page. Tashma. I hire someone to take care of my 4th year fruits. Now, 4th year fruits, not the Ravai, you have the Isser Orla. In the 4th year, they can be eaten, but they have a similar din as Meiser Sheni. They have to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Hare elu lo yochedu. The people who are working on this are not allowed to eat it. However, v'im lo hodi'em, if I hired them and I neglected to tell them that it's neta Ravai and it's restricted to be eaten outside of Yerushalayim, and their expectation was that they should get food, because they were hired for a regular job, and the Torah grants the poel access to food. So then, po de umachilan. As the balabas, I made an error. I miscommunicated. I didn't tell you were working on a neta Ravai field. You thought you were coming into a regular orchard, a regular grain field, and you were grabbing food right and left. I stop you when you walk onto the field. It says Neter Avai, don't eat the food if you're a Pole. The Pole's like, that's not right. You hired me. I was expecting lunch. Lunch is part of the deal. So says the Gemara, if it really belongs to Shamayim, so then amai podeh u'ma'achilan. If it belongs to Shamayim, if it really is Neter Avai in such a classical way, it should be Aser. Isura lo zachiluhu rachmana. There's no way the Torah is going to grant this guy permission b'di'eved to eat food that's Aser. It doesn't make any sense. Says the Gemara, you can't bring a raya from example number 7. There we have another issue, which is that it looks like a mekach tos. Now a mekach tos is when there is a mekach. My relationship with you, I'm the balabas, you're the pole. It's not a mekach, but it shmecks of a mekach. It shmecks of a mekach tos because I hired you for X, and the scenario was Y. What is implied from the Gemara is that that's not considered a perfect breach of contract. At least the Gemara doesn't speak about that here. Maybe it is, but it's not expressed in the Gemara. So therefore, the Gemara says that if I'm dealing with a case scenario of I hired you thinking that it was where you thought it was a regular field and I neglected to tell you Neter Avai, so then that case just looks like a mekach tos. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. Ema Seifa, we have a brisa. The brisa, it's not a brisa, it's a Mishnah on the next page. It's the, which one is it? Yeah, it's the first Mishnah on the next page. So there it says, Nisparsu agulav. Let's say that I make a cake pressed with figs and it starts to fall apart. So they were Nisparsu agulav and I hired someone to fix it. Nispaschu chavyosav, or the barrels of wine that I have start opening. Hare elu lo yochelu. The workers are not allowed to eat from there. Being lo hodian, but if I forgot to tell my worker the work that they were doing was usher to eat, so then me'aser u'ma'achilan. Then I have to be me'aser them in order to enable my workers to eat because they have a right from the Torah. It's very rare that we have rights in the Torah, but when it comes to po'alim, when it comes to avadim, there's a couple of examples, but here it's not right. It can't be that this perk of being able to eat the food is Mishal Shamayim, because if so, there's no way that the Torah would grant a person permission. This ridiculous, circuitous way to get to the food. That's just not possible. So it must be that it's Mishalo. If you want to say, like we said earlier by the Neta Ravai, that perhaps this case too, the case of Nisparsu Agulav and Nispaschu Chaviosav, that it's Kemekach Tos, well, those are two different cases, and they don't both check out. I could understand when it comes to Nisparsu Agulav how there could be a misunderstanding. I understand. Ela Nispaschu Chaviosav, my Mekach Tos Ika. Why would there have been a mekach tos with the wine? Meida yada de itbiluhu lemaiser. They should know that it has the status of tevel until the meiser is paid. They should have no havamina to think that they can eat that food, drink the wine. And if so, you can't say mechze. It's mechze ke mechze. What was the language? Mechze ke mekach tos. So therefore, Amar Rav Sheshes, no. The case with the wine is a little bit different. Shenis paschu chaviosav labor. That's where the barrels cracked open and they spilled back into their original vat. And in the original vat, maybe there was a havamina that before it's bottled that they should be able to eat it. Says the Gemara about Tanya, Yayin mishe yorad lebor. The chiyuv of meiser already takes place in the bor, and maybe the workers should never have assumed that they have a right to drink that wine. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva, the Amar mishe yakve, that once they scoop off the top layer of the wine, where they kind of skim the top of the wine to remove any impurities, the Amrule lo hava yodina. They didn't know that the hakafa had happened, that Rabbi Akiva's idea of mishiyakve had happened. So therefore, they didn't know. That's why there was a havamina, that perhaps it could be that it's a mekach tos. But you should have thought of that. You should have thought that would have happened. Says the Gemara, no, the Asra were halfway down on Tzadi Beis Manav. No, the workers might have thought, Asra Dahu Gavra, in that particular wine factory, in that winery, I should say, it's the Nagid Ihu Mikpa, the person who does the bottling, does the scraping of the top surface of the wine, the cleaning of the top surface. So therefore, they were expecting to do it themselves. That's why it might be some kind of mekach tos. Gemara says, well, okay. V'hashta the Tani Rav Zvid b'debei Rav Oshaya that yain mishiyara the bor v'yikpeh Rav Akiva Amar mishiyishta b'chabios. Now that we have this idea that wine, once it's put back into the original pit, into the original vat, and they scrape the surface, and Rabbi Akiva says, Mishayish the chavios, that's when this was actually a slightly different type of cleaning of the top of the liquid. When they would put all the ingredients together and fermentation would happen, there would be some bubbles on the top of the wine. And that's what Mishayish the bechavios is when we remove those bubbles. That's what some of the Rishonim here say. So afilu tema, if that's the case, afilu tema shalonis pasu chavios av labor. Even if the barrels were not fully open, to amrulei lo havayad inan the Mishnah, I never would have known that they had scraped the surface, and we thought that we could drink the wine. I thought that it would be allowed. It says the Gemara, even there by Rabbi Akiva's din of Mishayishla, the name of Dilma. Perhaps you should have thought that it's already usher for you to eat, because of Rabbi Akiva's din that the fermentation already happened and they scraped away the bubbles, they removed them. It says the Gemara, no, the workers thought that they had a havamina, that perhaps that the one who does the bottling is the one who does Mishayishla, and therefore could be that they might have thought that they had access to the food, and therefore source number 7 doesn't work. That brings us to source number 8, 2/3 of the way down, our last and final source, which will end with some nice finish at the end of the Mishnah right before the next Mishnah. Tashma. Let's say I'm a worker, and I know that I'm just going to call it 5%. It doesn't matter what the percentage is. I know I'm going to be eating 5% of your food, and I make $100. I say to you, look, you're the balabas on the phone. Don't give me the food. Give me the extra $5. I'd rather have the cash. I'm not so hungry. So says the Gemara, Kotzetz Adam al Yedei Atzmo, that I'm allowed to, as the poel, I can be kotzetz and tell you, I don't want the perk of the $5 of food. I'd rather have the cash. Al Yedei Beno Uvito Agdolim. I can also earmark it for some of my children. Al Yedei Avdo V'Shivchaso Agdolim, as well as for my servants who are adults. Al Yedei Ishto, and for the wife, Mibdei Sheyesh B'Hem Das. They can make a kinyan. They all have das. Aval, we're 3/4 of the way down on Tzadi Beis Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, Aval Eino Kotzeitz Lo Al Yedei Beno Vito Aktanim. I'm not allowed to repurpose my 5% benefit, the perk of being able to eat while I work. I'm not allowed to give that over, lo al yedei beno vito aktanim, to my younger children, lo al yedei avdo v'shivchasu aktanim, not to my younger servants, lo al yedei behemto, and not to an animal. Why? Mipnei she'ein bahen das. Kosal Kedaitach, says the Gemara, that this assertion that I'm not allowed to give it over to my child is b'ma lahen mizonos. That's when it's under an assumption that I feed my children. That's what the Gemara is assuming, because if I'm feeding my children, that means that they're not independent. It means that I'm taking care of them. Now, if you want to say that perhaps we should assume that the money is from the Shamayim, is that it's all a gift from Hashem and Matana, Mishum Hachi Eino Kotzetz. I could understand why there would be no Ktzitza, why you can't earmark to other people. Elai Amris Mishelohu Ochel. But if we're going to say that the money really belongs to you, the perk is yours, my X% raise every year is literally mine. It's not conceptually mine. It doesn't belong to the OU with strings attached. It's my money. I can do with it as I see fit. 403B, whatever my decision is, it is. But if you're going to say over here that I really do own the perk of eating while I'm working, so I'm going to tell you, the 10 stalks of corn that I was going to eat, I don't want them. Give them to my little child. Why would the brisa stop me from giving this to my child? It's my money. Elamai, it must not be my money. Says the Gemara, nice try, but not a good raya. Hacha b'mayoskinan, 5 lines before the wide lines. What must we be talking about? Perhaps this brisa is talking about something altogether different. Perhaps it's talking about b'she'ein ma'ala lehen mizonos. It's not a child that I support. The child is a young entrepreneur, and he makes a lot of money. And he said to me, I don't want to eat your food anymore. I have a chef. Thank you very much for all your help, Dad. I'm on my own. And in that case, you can't be kotzetz to that child, because he's not somech al shulchancha, and he has no das. He's not the kind of person who's able to receive such a gift. So says the Gemara. If we're talking about a case of ein ma'alam lehen mizonos, if it's a table where the child is not eating from, gedolim nami, But then maybe we shouldn't be able to give it to the adults because they're not somech al shulchancha. Says the Gemara, okay, I know that they don't eat from my table, but gedolim yodei v'kamachle. No, they have a cup. They know how to make decisions. You're 13 years old. I don't know if 13-year-olds today know how to make decisions. I don't know if most adults know how to make decisions. But if you're a gadol, you're a gadol halachically. This is all of our pre-game conversations, which we're not going to repeat on film. Yes. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. We have a din of Rav Oshai that doesn't stand with what we've been learning. 10 lines from the bottom. The Tana Rav Oshai. Rav Oshai teaches a din. Similar. I'm allowed to repurpose the perk of being able to eat while I work to myself, to my wife. That works. That checks out. That matches what we said. It either because the previous ones have das, the behema doesn't. Checks out, right? The line in the sand is das. So far, so good. This aligns with the brisa that we saw about kotzetz adam alidei atzmo, 2/3 of the way down. But then here things get a little wonky, and this doesn't work. First of the long lines, you are allowed to say that the perk of being able to eat while I work, I hereby pass that on to my eved and my shifcha, but bein gedolim uvein ketanim. Here we don't use our typical line in the sand of das, and that's odd, and it's against our brisa. So how do we understand the conflict between the brisa and Rav Hoshaya? My lab, isn't it the case that idi v'idi b'mala lahen mizonos? Maybe really both cases are talking about where I support either the children or the avodim, whatever the case may be. And really the machlokes between the brisa and Rav Oshaya is the mar savar mishalahu ochel, umar savar mishel shamayim hu ochel, that they distinguish that way. One's talking about one and one's talking about the other. And the Gemara says, again, nice try. Lo. The Kule Alma, perhaps really the way to understand this is mishalahu ochel. Really, the perk belongs to the owner and he can give it to anyone who has das. Below kasha, kan b'she'ein ma'ala lehen mizonos, ubraisa b'ma'ala lehen mizonos. We don't need both to be talking about the same thing. We have Rav Oshai and a brisa. One's talking about where we support them, and therefore, if I support them, even if they're ktanim, we're good to go. One's talking about where I don't support them, and then unless they have das, I can't give it to them. Perfect. So says the Gemara, wait 1 second. B'mayu kimta, how did you understand the brisa? That was b'ma'ala lehen mizonos, where you're feeding them. But if that's true, that brings up a question that we should have asked by ourselves. If that's true, we saw earlier in the brisa, 2/3 of the way down, that a child has no das, and we can't be kotzetz to them, where we can't earmark our perk to the child. But that doesn't make sense, because if we're saying that we're ma'ala lahen mizonos, that we're feeding the children, they're my bloodline. I'm taking care of them. They're somech al shulchani. Everything that they own is mine. I can earmark to them, no problem at all. Says the Gemara, it's true. But when it comes to the possibility of earmarking or not earmarking to a child, the Torah is not going to involve itself in ever being in a case where we're not going to give it to the kid. It's not good parenting. It's not the way we do things. Okay, and b'mayu kimta lemas nisin. I have my question mark in the wrong place here. B'mayu kimta lemas nisin. How did we understand the Mishnah? We had said that the Mishnah was b'she'ein ma'ala lahen mizonos. Well, let's see how this works out. This was the case of Rav Oshaya. Hanicha, turning to the top of Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph, and based on the time, we're just going to stop at the Mishnah. Hanicha lamanda amar, that ein harav yachal lomar le'eved aseimi v'nizancha shapir. I could understand our case of Rav Oshaya if we say that the master is not allowed to enslave someone without paying them. According to the Shita that holds, and we've seen this in previous Masechtas and Ksubis in multiple places, in Gittin, we saw it in Bava Kama, if I am allowed to say to my Eved, you're enslaved and I'm not paying you, you need to feed yourself going door to door, how then do we understand the din of Rav Oshaya? So the Gemara says, it must be, it must be, because there's no other way to understand the din of Rav Oshaya. It must be that both the Brisa and the Mishnah were talking about ma'ala lahen mizonos, where I'm feeding the people that I'm trying to earmark this perk to. Uvaha pligi, perhaps this is their argument. Demar savar yachol, demar savar eno yachol. They are arguing in whether or not we say, asemi ve'eni zancha. That's the machlokes. Rav Yochanan de Amar Yachol Harab, according to Rav Yochanan, who says that a master is allowed to enslave someone without salary. Shavik masnisen va'avid kibraisa. This raises a side question. If we hold that way, and we know that Rav Yochanan holds this way, that he holds that Yachol Harav to say Asemi Veni Zancha, that's a problem. Because then it looks like Rav Yochanan is sidelining a Mishnah in favor of a Brisa. That breaks the rules of Psak. Rav Yochanan would never do that. There is superiority of a Mishnah over a Brisa. There's no way Rav Yochanan would ever do that. Ella says the Gemara de Kuli Alma Mishal Shamayim Hu Ochel. Really, perhaps we should say that everyone knows that this perk of being able to eat while you work is Mishal Shamayim. V'lamatzi katzitz, and you're not allowed to earmark things to children, to avodim. U'may kotzitz dama Rav Oshaya. So what was Rav Oshaya talking about in regards to katzitza? He was talking about mizonos. He was talking about pre-feeding an eved, pre-feeding a child before they would do work. Says the Gemara, that's a problem. Maybe we should say that we can do the same thing by a behema, that we can pre-feed an animal with this food. Ella, no. Says the Gemara, really, this is the machlokes between the Brisa and the Mishnah, and with this we'll conclude. Demar savar mishalohu ochel, umar savar mishal shamayim hu ochel. It ends up being a machlokes tanaim. Let's review our question because we really only have one answer, super long-winded with 8 different approaches, or questions, I should say. We wanted to know if when a worker is given the gift by the Torah, the perk of eating while he's working from the master's field, is that considered a regular bonus, a tip? It's money in pocket? Or no, is that Mishal Shamayim? And we conclude in the Gemara that is a machlokes between a Mishnah and a Brisa, and that is how we end the Gemara with an answer of depends how you hold. We'll stop right here. In Yirtzeh Hashem on Shabbos, we'll pick up at the next Mishnah. Wishing you all a beautiful night.